I thank all of those partners to help us in putting this together this evening. And so now I'm going to ask for the DEC to come and present. I know you have, yes.
Thank you, Assemblywoman. Before I begin, Senator, did you want to say any words or say hi to the crowd?
That was the other thing I forgot. Excuse me. You got over here though, Senator. And also Councilwoman too, sorry.
We'll be very brief. It's okay. We'll keep you no joy. Don't worry, it's okay. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for coming out tonight. I'm State Senator Andrew Gowanus. Really happy to be here with you all. I want to thank Joanne and everyone who helped put this together. Tonight's really about getting information out to the community. We know over the last couple of months and years there's been a lot of questions raised, a lot of things in the news that we don't have a clarity on, and there's a lot of confusion. We want to try to dispel as much of that as possible, and we thought that this format would be the most effective and useful for everyone to kind of get a firmer grounding of what's what, and we hope that this is going to be a useful exercise for us all, so we hear directly from the folks who are doing this work what exactly is happening. I encourage you, if you have questions after this, like Joanne said, to submit them to us. We'll do our best to keep following up, and we all operate as a team, so we're always engaging with our agency partners as you in the community are flagging things for us, raising questions for us, identifying issues for us that we're not seeing. You're seeing it in real time. So continue that feedback loop, because then we take it right back to the agencies and we try to get resolution, answers, clarity, etc. So again, thank you very much for being out here, and I'll turn it over to our colleague, Councilmember Shahana Hanif.
Thank you so much. Good evening, everyone. I'm Councilmember Shahana Hanif, and I want to first acknowledge where we're at. We're at the Wyckoff Community Center, which is now officially a part of the 39th Council District. I was just with Ms. Bell and the other tenant association leaders this morning. I live nearby, so it's a great walk, 15-minute walk. And I know how important tonight's forum is, so I want to thank Assemblymember Joanne Simon for hosting and allowing the other colleagues, local and federal state electeds, to support in bringing together our state agencies to share more about what their priorities are, about the full remediation of the brownfield sites. And I know many of you have a lot of questions. And what I really appreciate about this process and this community dialogue and conversation is that this interagency effort, along with the collaboration of the elected officials, means that we are working together for more transparency for the present and future of the Gowanus neighborhood. We want a resilient Gowanus. We want to make sure that the integrity and safety of the residents who live here, work here, will live here are protected and prioritized first and foremost. And then I'll just share, I know Department of Environmental Protection, our city partner, isn't here, but through the Gowanus rezoning, my team oversees will make sure that the $450 million that was promised to Gowanus, and particularly the sustainability and resiliency efforts in making sure that the CSO tanks are built to protect the integrity of the Gowanus Canal Superfund site, and also making sure that the other thing that I'm forgetting right now. Where's Mia? I need a little bit of help. The sewer, making sure that the sewer is expanded. There's a lot required in making sure that we are hearing from our constituents and communities, so that we get to keep working with the agencies and bringing us all together. So thank you so much for showing up tonight. Do folks live here? Can you raise your hand if you live here? Who works in the neighborhood? Living in the neighborhood. In the neighborhood. And then who works in the neighborhood? Great. And everybody here loves Gowanus. And so thank you so much for your care and compassion and making sure that we do our job, that the agency do their job for the future of this neighborhood. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you, Shahana. And thank you, Andrew. To Senators and Council Member. And Tevin Williams is going to say a few words. He's got 45 seconds on behalf of Congressman Goldman.
Sure thing. Thank you so much, everyone. I'm Tevin Williams. I'm the Director of Community and External Affairs for Congressman Dan Goldman, so your federal representative in this area. I'm very thankful to be here tonight working with my colleagues from all of these offices and the principals here. I'll be in the back if you have any questions for us. Thank you for letting me come, and thank you for your engagement on this topic. It's very important to the congressman, and I'm glad that we can do a multi-level approach with all of our elected officials. Thank you so much.
I had no idea if it was 45 seconds or not. Okay, so now we will move on. Sorry, Sean. So here we have Sean Mahar.
Thank you, Assemblywoman. Nice to see you all tonight. Thank you all for coming out. So my name is Sean Mahar. I'm the Executive Deputy Commissioner for DEC. A lot of familiar faces in the crowd. Nice to see many of you, and nice to see some new faces as well. This is a continuation of our commitment to you all to keep you informed of what's going on. Obviously, we've had a couple availability sessions over the spring and fall last year. We're happy to do forums like this. We're really thankful that the Assemblywoman has convened this meeting tonight. And just so you all know, we've left a lot of materials out, our most recent community newsletter updates. We obviously have some poster sessions, DOH has information out, and on all those pieces of information are contacts for the state experts who are working on your behalf day in and day out. So if we don't get to your questions tonight, don't think this is your only opportunity to interact with the state. We have staff that are here for you and want to make sure that you have those conduits and pathways to get your questions answered. So we really look forward to the discussion tonight. I'm not going to do too much of the talking because I want you to hear from one of our experts, Heidi Dudek, who is a familiar face here if you're part of the Gowanus CAG and participate in those meetings. Heidi is one of the key folks that's working on your behalf day in and day out, and one of the most smart people that I've met in state government who really cares about these issues and knows a lot. So Heidi, why don't you take us away on this presentation tonight? And as Assemblywoman said, we have Andy Guglielmi here, who's our Director of the Division of Environmental Remediation. We also have Rodney Rivera here, who is in our regional office, a familiar face for many of you, and our regional director, Patrick Foster, will be here as well, in addition to myself and the other staff in the room. So we thank you for coming out, and I'll turn it over to Heidi to walk through.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I want to first make sure that you can hear me. I will tell you that it's very rare that somebody says they can't hear me, so we're going to go through. So I'm the section chief, which in DEC lingo means that I have project managers that work for me that are overseeing individual sites that need to be remediated. My section is coordinating all of the Gowanus Canal work from the state side, and then we work through with all of our other partners here. So just to give you an idea of who I am, I don't necessarily have information on every single site, but my section has a lot of them, and more importantly, if you have questions, I can get you back to the right person. So I'm going to kind of go through the Gowanus Canal area-wide study area. So explain where we are, what we're doing, and who the partners are, and then the basic premise of the Brownfield Cleanup Program, which I believe is really one of the predominant remedial programs, meaning cleanup programs in the Gowanus area and how that works. And then I'm going to turn it over to Department of Health. I know everybody here is also very interested in soil vapor intrusion. That'll come a little bit more towards the middle of my presentation, but I first want to kind of walk you through where we are and what's going on. So you go to the...
I gotta come over here.
Oh, sorry.
No, you're good.
All right, so I'm pretty sure everybody here knows that Gowanus has a very rich history of commercial and industrial practices. You know, New York City for many, many years, in fact, probably only up until about 40 years ago, was one of the largest manufacturing and industrial areas in the entire world. And a lot of that was also settled, here in the Gowanus area. So while that gave you a great history, it also left a little bit of an industrial legacy. And that's where we come in in DEC. So right now we have 49 sites. I know that sounds scary, but that's just 49 individual areas that have been identified that need some sort of cleanup. Somebody has found something there and it's come to our attention, and now we need to make sure that it gets cleaned up. And to do that, we have to work through a whole bunch of different programs. It's not just DEC all by ourselves. We have a lot of different programs. We have our state super fund, which I'll go into, and then we have the brownfield cleanup program, which I'll explain a little bit more. We also work with the Division of Materials Management. They deal with more in businesses that are still in the industry. We have our partner agency, Department of Health, who will go over all the health issues. We work with our federal partners, EPA, Mark and John Prince. And then, as I think it was mentioned just a couple minutes ago, we also work with the state programs. We work with New York City's Office of Environmental Remediation and New York City's Department of Environmental Protection. So you may hear me refer to those as OER or DEP. We have a lot of acronyms. If I start using them and you don't know what they are, please stop me. It's become part of my whole language and I forget.
I'll just add, we'll make sure this PowerPoint is posted on our Gowanus website, so you can always come back to the DEC. I know that some of you were straining to see what the slides were. I mean, obviously we tried to make the text as big as we can, but there's a lot of information, and our website has a lot of this, and we'll make sure the PowerPoint is up there as well.
All right, sorry, so I'm gonna have to look at my notes here, and I'm gonna admit, I'm old, and I have to look through the bottom of my glasses. So, DEC, what is our role as a state agency? We, the Division of Environmental Remediation, which is what I'm in, is the division that oversees the cleanup of properties that have contamination. We work on state superfund, we work on brownfield cleanups, we coordinate, again, like I said, with EPA, and then the most important thing that I think that's been one of the questions is we're the ones that at the end of a cleanup, we certify that it's been cleaned up. So, and then with that, we work with the Department of Health. Again, it's a joint operation. We don't work in a vacuum. We're always in constant communication with Department of Health because it's their job to ensure that in the protection of human health and the environment, they work on the human health and we look at it from the environment. EPA, their job here is that they're overseeing the national priority listing site, the Gowanus Canal, that's being cleaned up underneath the federal Superfund program, and I'm gonna leave that part to them. And then we have New York City. So New York City has its own environmental program, but most importantly, and this is something I think that gets mixed up with a lot of the acronyms, they do the building inspections. They're the zoning. We don't have anything to do with that. That's not in our purview. So when you have questions that may have to do with building issues, noise, things like that, we're going to refer you to New York City's building department or one of their other agencies. So can we go to remedial programs? All right, let's skip this. All right, so I already said these two words before. State Superfund. That's an enforcement program. It is where we hold the company that created the environmental or human health exposure accountable. It's also the program that if that company no longer exists, there's nobody there to do the cleanup, then we have the authority to go in and do it. So that's when you hear us refer to State Superfund. Here in the Gowanus Canal, that really isn't a big program. What we have here in the Gowanus is the Brownfield Cleanup Program. This program was designed to help encourage the redevelopment of quote-unquote brownfields. What's a brownfield? It's a piece of property that may have contamination or may be suspected for contamination, and for the most part, nobody wants to do anything with it because they don't want to take responsibility for it. So this program was designed to help to get people to clean up something so the state didn't need to have to come in, and so that instead of going to what we call green fields, so a very virgin piece of land that has never been developed, they would go to something that had already been developed, fill in infill infrastructure, and keep those other areas pristine. Now, there's been a lot of discussion over all the years. How are they different? Really, they aren't. They both require protection of human health and the environment. The fundamentals behind them aren't any different from one to the other. It's really a vernacular. To be honest, most of it is the state paying for it? Is a responsible party paying for it? Or is it somebody who has come in, purchased the property, and is redeveloping it, and are they paying for it? So that's kind of, I think, from a very simplistic way, without getting into all the details, is the best way to look at it. So brownfield for cleanup, it's no different than a brownfield under the state superfund or underneath the EPA circlet. All the programs protect human health and the environment. So how do we do that? That's the first question. So I have to let you know that the brownfield cleanup program is also voluntary. So when you come into it's somebody who has voluntarily found a piece of property. They either suspect it's contaminated and they've gone out and collected samples. They knew it had the likelihood to be contaminated. So it's voluntary. Again, state superfund is enforcement. So both of them, though, require that you need to investigate the piece of land. Sorry? Yep. Okay, we are there. So what is an investigation? How do we do that? What's that? Yep.
Can you also explain the incentives of why somebody would want to be part of the program?
Of the brownfield program? The way that the program was incentivized is that there are tax credits. I don't get into the actual tax credits, that's for the Department of Taxation. But what happens is...
Just press cancel, yeah.
Thank you.
That was the last.
All right, so the brownfield cleanup program is a voluntary program. There are tax incentives. Again, it incentivizes somebody to come in and take a piece of property that may be contaminated, that's going to lay fallow and not be addressed, to have somebody come in and investigate it and clean it up. And the way that why would anybody want to do that? Because there are incentives to do it through tax credits. So, but again, the premise and the underlying premise of the program is protection of human health and the environment. So the first thing you need to know is what's there, how much of it's there, and where is it going. So the first thing is what's there, where are the contaminants? You have to go out, you need to sample. We sample groundwater, which is we're underneath in the ground, as it said, groundwater. You test the soil. You test not only just the surface soil, but we go down to depth. We test indoor air, we test soil gas. We're testing all of the medias that could possibly have an exposure, and I'll let Scarlett explain what exposures are. But all the different ways that somebody or the environment may come in contact with that particular contaminant, we test that media. We determine how much, like again, is it there? What concentration is it at? And then really, and that's called the nature of contamination. You may hear us say that sometimes. We need to figure out what the nature and extent of contamination is. So the nature, what is it? How much is it? And then where is it going? How big is it? So where is it going? We test, is it going off-site? Is it in the groundwater? The groundwater, for those that may not understand, all groundwater moves. It's going to move in one direction or another, and we put wells in and we determine that. So where is the contamination going? Is it only in the soil? If it's in the soil, it's very unlikely that it's going to go anywhere. So we figure that out. How deep does it go? That's also important. Is it in the surface soil? And Scarlett will explain that. Is it only at depth? Those things all make a difference on what's called the nature and extent of contamination. So that's the first step. We have to figure out where it is, and then we have to figure out, does it have a significant threat? So I work with Scarlett pretty much on a daily basis. Sometimes she gets tired of hearing from me. We work in tandem. My division, we check, is there an exposure to the environment? Do we have to worry about where it's going from an environmental standpoint? Scarlett has to worry about it as to is there a human health exposure? Is there anything that we need to worry about? So then we work in tandem and we determine whether or not there's a risk associated with it. So that's our, so now we've got our investigation. We know what's there, what concentration it's at. Is it on site? Is it going off site? Does it have the potential to leave the piece of property? And then most importantly, is there an exposure? Is there a reason or a risk to human health or the environment? Again, this is the same in both programs, whether you're in State Superfund or in the Brownfield Cleanup Program. There's no difference. So now my PMs, my have project managers that work with me, and they're on all these sites. They come to us and they say, we know all of those things. What's the next step? Well, that's what we need to figure out. How do we clean it up? And that's your cleanup process. So again, it's working with the Department of Health. We have to figure out what the exposure pathways are, what the cleanup objectives are. Where is this piece of land located? Where is the contamination going? Is it going anywhere again? And then what's the future use of this property? Is it going to be used for restricted residential? Another term you may hear thrown around. What does that mean? That's multifamily housing. You can't have a single family house on it. Residential, that would be a single family house. Then you have commercial, again, that's a building, your local mall, and that. And then is it industrial? You know, is it something, a piece of property that's going to stay in industrial use? And again, also zoning plays a lot into that. But again, we don't have anything to do with zoning. We have to work with what's already out there. All right, so Scarlett has told us whether or not there's an exposure, what we need to address. We've looked at it, we know from the environment what needs to be done to protect the environment. So then the next step is, how do you clean it up? You've determined it needs to be cleaned up, but how do you do it? And again, this is an engineering process, it's an evaluation. In the brownfield cleanup program, the developer and their engineering consultants are going to present to us an alternatives analysis. And that alternatives analysis is where they're going to go through different types of remedies to address all the risks. And they're going to then pick which one they think is the best cleanup. Now here's the key. They can say that, but remember, we have to make sure that it meets our objectives. We, meaning DEC and DOH, have to make sure that whatever the exposure pathways are being addressed. So whether the developers, engineers pick it, a DEC or prepare the document, the DEC's engineering companies that work for us prepare the document, it doesn't matter. It still goes through the same review. Our goal, and when we were reviewing it, and trust me, we read every single page, and we've gotten some very large documents, is do we have all of these boxes checked off? Again, what is it? How much is there? You know, what's the concentration? And where is it going? What are the exposure pathways? And then does the remedy make sense? All right, does the remedy address all of those things, make sure it takes away all the exposure pathways, potential exposure pathways, and does it make sense as far as what the future use is going to be? And so how do we do that? The next slide, please. All right, it's a criteria. I'm an engineer, I'm gonna let you know, we like lists. We like lists a lot. We like to be able to go through and dot our I's and cross our T's and double check. And so to do that, we've got this great list. Again, it's working in tandem with Department of Health. Does it meet number one, does it meet human health protection? Right there in the environment. The two, that's really, again, over and over again, does it protect human health and the environment? And how do we know that? Because there's been a lot of people that came before me, a lot of smart people that have developed, including EPAs, we use a lot of their stuff, standards, criteria, and guidance. These are our parameters. This is our checklist. These are the things that we need to make sure that they're meeting to protect human health and the environment. And then long-term effectiveness and permanence, I think that's kind of obvious. Is it going to stay? Is it a short-term fix or a long-term fix? We need to know that. Reduction of toxicity, mobility, and volume of contamination. Again, how much was there and how much are we going to get rid of? Our goal is always to get rid of as much contamination as feasible. And that's a key word. Sometimes you can't get everything. You need to mitigate the exposure first. Sometimes if the contamination is so deep and there's no way that there's an exposure to it, we've determined that it's not feasible to get it. We're going to monitor it and watch it and make sure that it doesn't go anywhere. Short-term impacts and effectiveness. I think that everybody here is going to tell us about all the short-term impacts that they are feeling because of all the work that's going on. We do look at that, and that's again my section. Holistically, we're trying to look at the entire Gowanus Canal and understand how everything is working together. Ability to implement, I was just talking about that. You know, as much as I'd like to say that we can dig, 200, 300 feet, we can't do that. It doesn't make sense, particularly if you have a piece of land that's like the half the size of this room. If anybody's in construction, you know that you really just can't do that. There's a practicality to it. There's a limitation to our technologies that makes something being able to be done. I'd like to be able to say that we could do everything. Trust me, I push as hard as I can for as much as I can. That's my goal. But we all have to know that.
But why are we talking about putting housing on sites that you know that you cannot clean up to the level of the law?
The questions are really supposed to be later. Let them make their presentation. DOH will also speak, EPA will speak, then we will ask questions, and I will be asking questions that were submitted.
Okay, and I should say that, as we're coming down in here, obviously, it's kind of ranked in priority here, so that you all understand that. We're not gonna go, cost is our number one driving criteria. But it does come into effect, particularly and sometimes if you have two remedies that essentially do all the same things, we look at it, it may be a tiebreaker, but again, it doesn't drive anything in particular. Community acceptance, we do listen to everybody. I think that a lot of people have talked to me, we hear you, we understand your concerns, we try to work within our rules and our regulations and what we can and can't do. And then land use, again, that's where you're talking about zoning. Again, we don't have anything to do with that. If we know though that the zoning may be changing, we try to look forward to the extent we can, but again, that's not our purview. So here is one of the differences between State Superfund and Brownfield. And I'm gonna move away from the heat here because I'm about ready to pass out. So hold on. And we seem to have lost our slide.
We will share all of this deck with everybody.
I'm